Hi, welcome to Hat Many Things with our hosts Mike and
Tom.
So joining us today, we have two guests who we have spoken to on the Kingdom Death subreddit. If you care to introduce yourselves, gents.
Yes, hi, I'm Jack.
I'm Buddy.
Hey, Buddy. So we've got Jack and Buddy, who are obviously going to be the names of my next two Kingdom Death survivors. I'll let you know how it goes. And we are talking today about Kingdom Death Monster, which is what is Kingdom Death Monster? It's a board game, to start off with the basics. Who wants to elaborate on that?
It's a 19-pound board game.
That is weight, not price. For the two British people in this conversation.
I forgot. It's a big box.
Yeah, you could stop a door with it. Like, legitimately, the door wouldn't open. It's enormous, and that's
It takes up an entire shelf in my room. Just the box by itself takes up the shelf.
Shelf. It's underneath it.
You could probably kill someone with this box.
Or it's
I wouldn't want it to hit
the
me.
game gives heart attacks.
That's true.
So, Kingdom Death Monster. I don't know when the first edition of Kingdom Death Monster came out.
It was pitched on Kickstarter about 6 years ago, and it ran the first. The Kingdom Death Monster 1 ran as a Kickstarter for about 3 years, and I bought into it about halfway through that. And when it started shipping, I was in like the third shipping group that got it. So I got it in 2016 and have since played through it twice. It takes about that long to play.
And was that the
twice.
same campaign both times?
I played through, the main game campaign, played through it twice with the same group of core people, with a couple of people switching in and out to play the fourth survivor.
Right. And did you win?
The first one we won. The second one we did not.
And how many times did you get the rules wrong?
I'm like super specific on how we play with the rules. So in the first campaign, I think we got the rules wrong twice. And on the second campaign, we got the rules wrong 0 times, which is why we died.
And it has one very important rule, doesn't it? Which is the rule of death.
The rule of death.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And the rule of death, for anyone who's not familiar with it, states that if you're unsure about the rules, rule in the favour of not the players. So always take the worst possible outcome that you can imagine. That is the correct interpretation of the rules.
Yep.
And there are some bad options in there from what I've seen.
So it started on Kickstarter, and its first campaign ran for how much money, Tom?
It ran for $2.05 million.
And that was a lot of money at the time.
Yeah, that was.
It's a lot of money now. Let's be honest.
I have a feeling it was the biggest board game Kickstarter when it came out.
Until it was beaten by things like Exploding Kittens.
Yes, but this was back in a time when I think the one before it was probably Ogre, which I own, which is another ridiculous box. It weighs 12 kilos, but it's not got the miniatures. It's mostly cardboard as opposed to miniatures. So that's where the price difference is.
Cardboard's not that heavy.
Well, I did a lot of popping out of models. I think that was like 1.3 million, maybe, and that was again that was an established IP. It was the 6th edition of that game, and it was like, there's no way this is going to exist unless we have a Kickstarter for it. Whereas Kingdom Death was completely new, and I think people were just taken up by how interesting an idea it was at the time.
Yeah, I definitely bought into it for how different it was.
And the fact that the three sort of phases, it's almost like multiple types of game in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So Kingdom Death Monster 1.5 is where I bought in. I heard about Kingdom Death shortly after the first Kickstarter ended, when the webcomic artist for Control-Alt-Delete was glowing about it, which I used to read at the time. And he was absolutely going on about how it's the best game he's ever played. So I took an interest. I read more and more about it, and then I honestly waited a couple of years until it came out again, because it doesn't really do stocking on the shelves, does it?
No, there's almost no stocking that any store in the world carries. I mean, I guess a store could carry one at a time.
And you can't order really a core game directly from the website either, can you? They just sort of do it in batch runs.
Right. They only make it in single print runs. So when that run runs out, they wait until they're developing more product to try to start a new one.
And Kingdom Death 1.5 was the latest iteration of this. And Tom, how much did that pull in? Because this staggered you earlier, didn't it?
Yeah, I had a look at this, and so this is 4 times the backers of the original, but the total pledge was $12.4 million. So that's about 6 times. So people are on average pledging for more that run, and bearing in mind some people in that were just pledging for like the 0.5 upgrade. But yeah, so that's adding, the average spend per person is pretty huge there.
It's somewhere in the region of $1,000, isn't it? The average spend on that game per customer. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I say, as someone who spent that much.
Yes. Yeah, it's a financial investment for sure, but I can understand the Kickstarter jumping up so much after the expansion sold out for Monster 1, because they sell for $60 as a expansion from the developer, but in the secondary market, an expansion can go for $300.
Wow.
So if you've got the money when there's an edition run, it's worth just buying multiple copies for resale.
Yes, it is 100% worth it.
I mean, for reference, for people who may not have played as many board games as we have, that's so the standard price for an expansion is the price of a whole other normal board game.
Yes.
And then you're saying that when it sells on the secondary market, you're talking more than most any other board games cost. You know, more than Gloomhaven, more than things like that.
The price of a modern game console.
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Staggering amounts of money for a board game, but I think the value comes through in the miniatures. Like, this is what really drew me in the first time is, game mechanics aside, interesting narratives aside, choices aside, the miniatures are of a staggering quality that I have only seen matched by Games Workshop. I've not seen a single other games producer churn out miniatures of that quality.
These are singular in their specific quality. They're literally amazing. Like, the amount of detail you can get on one face that is a quarter the size of your thumbnail. You can see facial expressions. You can see eye details.
Mm-hmm.
Until I paint it, at which point it starts to look like a model like your average 6-year-old. I can't paint eyes, man. They're just blobs sticking out of the face like giant glowing orbs. I'm like, I wanted detail. This is not detail. What have I done? I paid a lot of money for this and I've ruined it. I should have hired a professional. So pledge levels. I pledged an obscene amount of money, but what I get for my amount of money is phenomenal. I get the core game, which is normally about $350. I get 12 existing expansion packs. I get the Gambler's Chest, which we'll come back to later because that is a phenomenal incentive. And I've ordered maybe about 8 new expansions or something. The amount of content that I'm getting for that money is incredible. So pledge levels. Tom, have you got the Kingdom Death 1.5 Kickstarter up?
I have, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to run us through some of the basic pledge levels?
So we'll skip ones like the pledge of $5 just so you can access add-on. So at $50 on Black Friday, it was possible to get the 1.5 update pack for the original game. So you already had to own the original game there. And then if you skip up, you go to $185. And that's still only the update pack, the Gambler's Chest, which we'll talk about in a bit, and then the first hero expansion. So that's nearly $200, and you haven't got the base game at that point. And then
that assumes that you already have the base game.
Yes, yeah, that's the point of that level. But it takes until you get to $200 on a Black Friday deal to get the whole of 1.5, so the original game and the update. That has a estimated delivery of December 2020. It's not even anywhere near yet. That's crazy, because when did this go out? It was last year, I think you paid for it.
Yeah, so you sort of paid for your main pledge when Kickstarter ended, and the shipping you pay for in waves, because the products are delivered in waves. So wave 1 was the core game or the expansion update for people who didn't have it. Wave 2 was the existing expansion packs that will be reprinted. Wave 3 will be the Gambler's Chest, and Wave 4 will be future expansions. So these have generally been submitted about 9 months after the Kickstarter, I think, for the first wave. Wave 2 is in delivery now. Wave 3 is probably going to be late this year. And they've given, depending on the expansions and the production times, etc., up until maybe summer 2020, the latest. They're hoping to get all of the expansions out to people, which does mean that when you do invest in this game, you can potentially be getting 4 years worth of deliveries and content to look forward to. And the core game is easily big enough to keep you occupied until more content arrives. Easily.
Yeah, my first campaign run through took us 4 months, and that was with us playing almost every week with the same group of people.
Was that one lantern year per week?
Yeah, it was 1 lantern year per week, and we went up to, I think, 32 years, with a couple of weeks skipped with the same group of 4 people, and barely survived the entire thing.
Briefly back onto the pledges, the standard version of that pledge, which was the core game for 1.5 with the Gambler's Chest, was $350. Then you jump massively when you go to what I think is the one you got, Mike, which is not including extra add-ons, but it's
I got the Ancient Lantern. The Ancient Lantern.
Ancient Gold Lantern, $750. So those 12 extra expansions costing another $400 on top.
And the really dangerous thing is, each time they announce a new wave's going to start shipping, they sort of give the opportunity to buy more in future waves. So every time they ship a new wave, I've got a bit more money, and I'm like, oh, let's just throw another expansion on in the future. So this just keeps growing in price.
And then probably the last one worth mentioning before we start getting into the silly kind of high-level Kickstarter options is if you pledged $1,000, you got all of that we've just mentioned. Oh no! Wait, sorry. You don't even get the 12 existing expansions. No. That's Kingdom Death 1.5, Gambler's Chest, a T-shirt, and then all the new expansions and promos from the 1.5 Kickstarter.
But it's all the pinups and all the new pinups and all the new promos as well. So there's a whole load of extra models that aren't necessarily designed to be used in the core game, but are a modelist stream, or perhaps a male modelist stream.
Yeah, and then if you wanted to get, oh no, it doesn't even have that. Like, it's looking through this. It's a bit of a maze.
I don't think there is one pledge option that actually includes everything. You know,
probably not.
I don't think that people could buy it
for $1,666. There
we go. Satan's Lantern.
Yeah, Final Form Satan's Lantern was the core game, Gambler's Chest, 12 current expansions, all new expansions, pinups, promos, a T-shirt, pinups of Death Series 1, and then all the promos from the previous one, pinup and promos. So that's probably pretty much. And then there's $2,000 for God Frog Dog, which adds in more pinups of death. And then it just keeps going. I don't think we should go through and list every single pledge option.
No, people will be able to view in the show notes the link that goes to the campaign. But there were a lot of different levels, and I think when you talk about Kickstarter, Kingdom Death 1.5 was an example of how to do Kickstarter right. They kept you interested and engaged for the whole campaign. There were always new content being revealed for what was going to be there. So it's not like right at the start, they were just like, here's what you pledge, here's what you get. They did it like a campaign. They were always revealing more content and additional things and the quality of the miniatures. So it kept you engaged. Even if you were just a bit interested, you wouldn't have clicked it once. You'd have come back every couple of days to see what the new stuff was, just to tempt you in more and keep you engaged, keep you clicked, which is also going to, click into a lot of algorithms for advertising and pushing and making things trend because people are returning to it. So the number of clicks it's generating is enormous.
Yeah, it's the idea behind the Gambler's Chest, which I think we said we're going to discuss now, of they're rolling a D100 to see what gets added into this box pretty much every day of the campaign. I mean, that's going to incentivize people to come back and see all the stuff that's being added. And
the Gambler's Chest is exclusive to the Kickstarter, and the stuff is not going to be available post-Kickstarter. And it contains whole new monster encounters, an awesome number of narrative sculpts, extra equipment cards, extra rule sets. It's just so full of content, it's untrue.
Yeah, so it's described as a boutique game. Those of you who've backed it and have it, how you say it took up a whole shelf in your house. How does it have pride of place? Is it something you have out on display?
Yes, I have my built characters, I have my built bosses on a shelf below the shelf that holds the box by itself. But you can definitely get like the boutique feel from it because every playthrough feels like super separate, super engaging, very immersive. And as you play through successive times, it really becomes your game toward the end of it. And the narrative experiences that you get out of this game are something that are unlike anything that I've ever played.
So I would say the same in terms of narrative experiences for board games. We play a lot of tabletop RPGs, so I think the narrative experiences for those are the height of narrative experience in gaming for me, but Kingdom Death is the height of narrative experience in a board game for me. You make your survivors, you name your survivors, things happen to your survivors, usually not in their favour. Survivors have children. We had 2 survivors who came back from a hunt. We had a hunt event, or a settlement event, where they had a big argument. This was going to recur every single year unless they got it sorted. Then we had them have an intimacy chart roll, which is where they roll for making the babies. They had a baby. They then had a duel, and one of them killed the other one because they hated each other so much. So we then called the child Hate Spawn. And Hate Spawn has gone on to be the greatest champion of our campaign. He's still alive. He's still killing everything in sight. And I roleplay Hate Spawn with a great passion in that there is no tactical strategy. Hate Spawn's sole job is to charge directly at whatever he's fighting while screaming Hate Spawn. He wears the man mask, which I only assume is made out of human flesh, and dual wields lion guitars with a luck stone and has some plus luck, so he's a complete crit build. And he's managed to not be severely injured once in about 6 hunts. It's really crazy.
I have a character that was built similarly with a luck build with guitars, but he had a tragedy narrative where during a fit of madness he killed his own son. And then when he killed his son, he was given a skull, and then he fashioned the skull into a skull helmet. So he wears his own son's skull as a mask.
Bit of a small helmet, isn't it?
He became nominated by lightning, so he got extra attacks. He became the leader of the city. He's like nigh invincible, but in his second mission he ever had before he even had a son, he lost his arm. So he's this one-armed destroyer of the world, killed his own son, leader of the city.
The leader of our city wields a spear, and he was one of the founding survivors, the only one that still lives. His name is Afraid, and he spent the entire first prologue hunt running away and choosing to not engage it and letting the other 3 do everything. So thank you to that player. He spoke the first words, he's become the settlement leader, and he's participated in as few hunts as possible because he likes his position. So, unboxing. How did it feel to receive the biggest board game you've probably ever touched when you got that?
It was
in post?
amazing. It took an entire day just to look at all the stuff in it. I didn't play it. I didn't put anything together. I sat down for 6 hours and just looked at everything in the box. 2 friends came over and we're just like, "Ooh, look at that thing! Wow, look at this thing!" And 6 hours later, we're like, "I guess it's time to go home now."
Yeah, and the fact it doesn't come with instructions on how to put the models together, does it?
It does not. No,
You have to look them up either from Vibrant Lantern or now they've started putting them on the Kingdom Death Monster website, I believe.
They have the build.kingdomdeath.com, but in the second wave of shipping in 2016, they had no build instructions. So it was, you picked stuff up and you looked at it and you go, "I think this goes here," and then you got the build instructions later and like, "I did that wrong."
So, huge credit to the folks over at Vibrant Lantern who did put together build instructions with the models and with all the pieces laid out. Fantastic tool for people before real instructions were released. But, I mean, when you think of the sheer number of tiny hands on the Phoenix model, and you
could not have built the
which
Phoenix
slot they all go on.
Without Vibrant Lantern, the Phoenix and the Watcher both would still be in the box.
And you'd be halfway through 2 campaigns.
Yeah.
I think the worst model I've tried to put together so far is the Necromancer. I've got this little lowly Necromancer model with these little skeleton ghosts that come out the floor, and some of the pieces are so minute and tiny that I just think, why were they not on an extension of this piece? I don't understand why this is a separate piece. It's like he wanted to make a really difficult game. Did he need to make it difficult to assemble as well?
Let's make it difficult to buy, difficult to ship, difficult to open, difficult to play, difficult to build, difficult to paint.
And
So
he
wanted
still
this to
made
be hard.
$14 million.
Jesus.
Well, he made $40 million of revenue.
Yes.
That also doesn't count the amount of sales that he's made on his own site.
But I believe the first Kickstarter ran at a loss, which is staggering when you've pulled in that much money. And when you've got so much money per investor, there's something must be going wrong with the management side of things. But I believe that Adam is, as a designer, very hands-on and micromanages, and he does have a full team, but he has a reputation for micromanaging everything.
Yes, you can read through the blog and find during the first printing of Kingdom Death him going through and visiting each individual printing facility in China and meeting with the teams that were going to print his stuff in China, and he would take trips to go do all of that. He was like, oh, something happened. I didn't like this seller. I'm going to go back next month and visit another one.
I mean, even on this one, just the slight delay so that you could put extra packaging on to make things safer, make things more secure. He's constantly going back and revising things and improving things, but the product he's produced at the end of it is phenomenal. So he's a great designer. I've got no idea whether he's a great businessman, but he's great at marketing and he's great at designing. So did you guys get any expansions?
I haven't gotten any of the expansions. Every time I've tried to buy one, they've gone sold out in the same week that they've become available.
Did you get any on Kingdom Death 1.5?
I haven't yet. My summer check is coming in from my job when I get my summer bonus, and that is going to be spent on one vacation and one Kingdom Death purchase.
See, I perhaps foolishly, having never played the game, I did get the Ancient Gold Lantern, so I should get all 12 of the existing expansions. And I'm getting the Gambler's Chest, I'm getting the Rolled Survivors and the False Messengers models, and then I'm getting Abyssal Woods, Black Knight, Ivory Dragon, Screaming God, and Silver City. And that list keeps growing every time there's another wave, and they give you an opportunity to add more funds. I'm a sucker for models. I'm a sucker for beautiful models. My general sort of Kickstarter board games have included Rising Sun, Kingdom Death, Champions of Horror. So, if it comes with nice, pretty miniatures, then it's really easy to rope me in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, speaking as someone who's played it with you once, Mike, and very much enjoyed it.
You would play it with me far more if we didn't live on opposite sides of a country.
Yes, definitely.
A country
if you were
that
in
is
your...
geographically smaller than Texas.
Yes. But if it was, if you lived where you did last year when you'd ordered it, obviously I'd be around playing it
You
more
probably
often.
wouldn't leave me alone, would you?
Well, we'd be podcasting together. We'd be playing Kingdom Death. I might as well move in at that point. I was going to say. So the expansions, you said the miniatures are kind of the thing that drew you in. Are all the expansions adding miniatures, or are they adding different play styles?
All of the expansions come with miniatures. So, you guys have been involved in Kingdom Death more than me, and I've not had a chance to play the expansions yet. So, which expansions have you guys been most interested in? And as Tom says, what do they add?
I was really interested in the Dragon Festival, where it adds in separate lantern years. It adds in a new final boss. It adds in different story events that are guaranteed to happen. It adds in new items, new equipment. It extends the game entirely.
Having not played through it, when you say it extends the game, presumably that means you just get to where there would have been the end. There's now bonus content. You can do this extra. There's an extra bit of story, and it just carries on like that. It's not. You didn't end the game because all your people were dead. You ended the game because you got to a completion of the story, right?
Yes. Yeah. My first playthrough, we finished the game. We still had people surviving. We didn't have an expansion to move into, so that was the end of our game. But if you had the expansions to move into, some of them triggered during your original playthrough before you get to the end, and some of them are like end game content where they're expecting your characters to be able to stand up with all of their developed equipment and be able to fight these enemies.
So I believe that the future expansions are going to come in a slot basis, and they're going to slot into certain years. Is that correct?
Yes.
How does that work?
So as you play through, you have a timeline on your settlement page, and each single play session takes one settlement year. And as you get to each settlement year, there are triggered events that are guaranteed to happen. And the way that these slots will work is as you open the slot expansion, it'll tell you what year this expansion happens on. And that's giving your settlement a chance to develop the necessary skills and the necessary upgrades to be able to survive the encounter.
And of course, it's most fun if you don't know what you need to survive it the first time you encounter it.
Exactly. Yes, whenever we were making the decisions that you make as you develop the settlement innovations, we didn't even look at the cards. We just read what the names were and went, which things should we make?
So some expansions have a generally better or worse reputation than others, don't they? I believe Orm is generally well regarded and Dragon King is generally well regarded.
Yes, both of those are well regarded. The Spidercules is kind of mixed reviews. The Slender Man is not really highly rewarded.
I think the Spidercules is possibly the single most impressive model I've seen, though. I think it's the detail on it and the sheer size that it takes up as well. But I can imagine it was very awkward to move around the board with all of its legs.
It's absolutely terrifying to look at, and I've seen it played at a couple of the game conventions in Dallas, but I don't think I would ever undertake building that by myself.
I believe also, like, I read a thread where someone pointed out, because everyone used to debate how to pronounce it, didn't they? Apparently, Adam Poots, the designer, always spells ridiculous incorrectly. And spidiculous, which is the correct way of saying it, apparently, is a play on the fact that he can't write the word ridiculous.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Apparently, it's called the spidiculous. Someone pointed it out on Reddit after noticing that he has a habit of typing incorrectly, and he confirmed on the same thread that was it, and that he actually incorrectly did it by accident on the spidiculous as well when he spelt it, because it should be OUS at the end, and he just spelt it incorrectly.
It seems like he has so many. This just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where every single aspect of the game is so hard to pick up. Like, you can't even pronounce the names of the monsters now.
Yeah, but that's part of the philosophy, wasn't it? Is that he wanted the game to be difficult. Like, he intentionally made a difficult game.
Yeah, it's intentional from top to bottom. Every aspect of it gives you the opportunity to fail.
I mean, I feel like maybe the not including build instructions might not be. but moving on from that point, how have you found the building and painting? Like, so I'm a big miniatures fan, but I've found that for me, time is a problem. That's one of the reasons I don't. Time and money are the two reasons I didn't buy Kingdom of Death myself, but also because I was.
That's because you invest in Reaper miniatures, mate.
Oh yes, yeah, I have so many Reaper miniatures on my shelf to build, yeah, like I also knew people who were buying it, so I figured I'd get an opportunity to play it, and then if I decided it was the absolute best game, I would then go out and buy it. But fortunately, I know several people who I could play it with. But yeah, as I was saying, with building and painting, how have you found the process? Is it I mean, they're beautiful models. So is it enjoyable? Is it challenging without the instructions?
Yes,
so on and so forth.
It is really intimidating to pick up and do this. I come from a background of having built a 4,000 point Tyranid army from Games Workshop, so I'm used to all the little pointy things and all of the small attachments, but still looking at something that is literally smaller than your thumb and then trying to hold it together, and you feel like you owe it to the model for it to be put together correctly. It's just so nice that if you put it together incorrectly, I feel like I have to start over.
Yeah, and you'd feel like you have to sort of buy a whole new model. And when it comes with that kind of price tag, you really do have to get it right first time, don't you?
Yes, you have to really sit down, decide what order the things go in, make sure you have your supplies all put together. Because if you get ahead of yourself and you put together the thing wrong and you realize that the arm blocks the twist of the cloak, if you put it together in the wrong way, that you're like, oh, well, I was using super glue.
So have you got any recommended tools, techniques for people who want to build and paint?
You definitely need a small file sander. If you don't have anything that can file the small little bits off, then you're going to be left with something that has flash or something that has unnecessary cuts. You're also going to need some kind of tweezer combo, 2 sets of tweezers to put together smaller pieces. You need everything that you can get to put together a regular set model. So you need the clip cutters. You need whatever set of glue that you're going to use. Bases.
So with the bases, presumably it comes with a standard set of bases. I saw one of the expansion options was just loads of bases with skulls all over them. Did you end up getting just the standard bases, or do you do stuff to your bases to make them stand out more, or are you just...
I did get the skull bases, and I got the face masks on the floor bases. I got both of those. And so I used the skulls for like the bosses, the enemies, the butcher, and then I used the face masks for the survivors that have actually lasted past the first couple of years. So if I'm just putting something together to run really quickly, I'll just put it on the regular base. And if I am attached to this character, whenever I'm giving him the correct loadout for what he's built for, then I put him with the nicer base.
So talking about boss fights, and we've touched on the gameplay a bit so far, talking about different phases, but we haven't really covered that for people who haven't played the game themselves. So what are the gameplay basics? What are the different phases of the game, and how does each of them feel?
And how does it differ from anything else on the market?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So your 3 phases of the game are the settlement phase, the hunt phase, and the fight phase. So in the settlement phase, you are literally city building and developing skills and developing technologies and developing the relationships between your settlement. You're dealing with story events. It's a very like overview kind of narrative structure of a city. Then each settlement year, you go on the hunt. So the hunt phase is where you choose your adventuring party and you go through a series of events that are roughly 90% bad, 10% good. And you just try to survive in this hellscape of a world between your settlement and wherever the next source of food is. And as you get to this source of food, you have to deal with finding weird things out in the world, different...
Cancer pigeons.
Cancer. One of my favorite ones is we found a statue, and if you touch the statue, the statue turns you into a rock, and you take the new statue person as a new survivor with you.
It just
And
swaps.
so we had him named Dwayne Johnson, the Rock, and we took him onto the next event that happened, in which you were infatuated with an object near you. So we rolled the dice and it was a rock. So we made the rock carry a rock, and he goes into the battle and dies literally his first round. But in the battle, you really deal with separate sets of cards, and I really like the way that the boss monsters are designed, in that they have a random set of attacks. So you shuffle up the attacks for the monster, and
based on the monster's level, you'll have a different criteria for the deck. So the monsters have basic, advanced, and legendary actions. And a level 1 may have a certain number of basic and advanced. A level 2 may have more of both. A level 3 may have all of them plus some legendary actions. But because you change what's in the deck and it's quite shuffled, you end up with a monster that it doesn't behave the exact same way as the previous time you fought it.
Yeah, you have an idea of how it can fight, which feels like you are studying your prey. Like if you go in to fight the lion for the 3rd time, you're like, I know how the lion fights, but I don't know what it's going to do first.
One thing I thought, so I've only played with Mike through 2 White Lion combats, and
the town of Jindale, accompanied by much ginger and
we had a lot of
by
gin.
Princess Juniper.
It was a good introduction to the game. But one thing I really like is how the health system is linked to the attacks with the discarding of the cards, and that really makes it feel like you're making a dent. But also when you can know that one of the cards in that deck is a really powerful attack. And it's really thematic in that the creature is now attacking you like all out, but it's also really bad when you're like, oh, we have no health left. We've thrown all our rocks at it, and we're now just being eaten alive.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely still 16 cards there. We can't do this.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I like the way that the monsters behave like you would almost expect them to. So the level 2 White Lion has a really great habit of what cats do with toys, in that it will, at the end of every turn, if anyone's near it, it will pick them up and run off with them. And
Yes.
it is faster than your party, meaning your party takes a whole turn to catch up to it. And then it will do it again next turn that someone else is next to it. So it just keeps grabbing one of your guys and running off with them, and then batting them round like a cat does with a toy.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to Adam Poots as a designer, and that everything that happens in the game, every boss fight that you have is super thematic, super immersive. And it feels like you're really fighting an individual thing and not just the level 2 boss.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the antelope, it likes to run away and dodge, but then if it gets a run up, it will instant kill whoever it hits because it's charging at them with great big horns. They behave so differently, and I've got the Phoenix next. I've not fought the Phoenix yet, so I'm looking forward to getting some of that delicious rainbow poop and eating it for that +1 strength or dead.
Yes.
Like, ooh, rainbow poop. Should I eat it? I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, we had a character who had the compulsion that anything that he could eat, he had to eat. I think it was Jack's character.
Scatman. Yeah, we renamed him to Scatman. Yeah, they eat all the food.
He's running alongside us to the hunt, just boop it up, and then like runs into a fountain of blood, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna drink from it." Don't do that.
And how did that turn out for him?
I'm trying to find his character sheet to see if he survived.
I remember for several of the things, it was he got good rolls on the things that he had to eat. So it was like Fountain of Blood, and like 1 out of 10 chance you get +1 strength or whatever. It was like he would get it. So he had to run around and become stronger from the world feeding him.
That sounds great fun. But there are also alternate campaign modes, aren't there? Oh, sorry, before we get on to that, in the settlement phase as well, and this is very similar to the way that the monsters act differently every time, because you draw different cards and you eliminate different cards. The innovation tree deck, that's great.
Yes.
So the innovation tree deck is almost like your tech tree, and you draw 2, pick 1, and then say you pick languages or you pick the hovel, it will then add more cards to the deck. There's more possibility what you can draw. So you add the hovel, you suddenly get the options for ovens and beds, and they all have different effects on your performance as a party when you send them out. So I'm in Lantern year 8 or 9 or something, and I've still not invented the home. we've got forges, we've got like war drums and bloodletting, but we don't have houses. So it means next time you play it, your innovation deck's going to be completely different again, and that's just, it adds so much variety to the game, and especially with the fact that the expansions are going to be modular, so you're going to swap in and out different parts of the game. There's so many combinations of campaign that you can put together. It's great.
Yeah, it plays a lot, talking about similarities and differences to other games. The settlement phase feels a lot like a legacy game by Rob Daviau, how as you develop, more of the game unlocks, and it's in a way that you can't access parts of the game unless you complete steps of the game.
Or steps in a certain way, which creates replayability.
Yeah.
And that being said, there are alternate campaigns, aren't there?
Yes, there are. The one that I've been looking forward to trying to run this summer is the 7 Samurai alternate campaign, where you start with 7 men, no women, everyone has sword proficiency, and that's it.
Do you start with swords, though?
I actually don't know if you start with swords.
It doesn't sound like the kind of game that would let you.
Yeah. 7 Samurai, 7 rocks. Ready, set, go.
So the gameplay, it differs and it's similar in some ways. I mean, I think a big competitor that's just come out and done really well, I think it's taken a very high spot on BoardGameGeek.com, is Gloomhaven. How similar is Gloomhaven? Does anyone know?
I haven't gotten to play it. I've been looking forward to playing it. I've looked at it on BoardGameGeek, and I have just not had it at my house yet.
See, I considered investing in Gloomhaven, but I went, I've already got Kingdom Death.
Right.
Like, are they too similar to make it worth it?
I get the impression that Gloomhaven is probably Kingdom Death Light in scope, but then again, it is only £150, I think, to get the whole game.
Only.
So, but by comparison, that is by comparison, that's very little money than some people have spent on Kingdom Death.
It seems like it's more commercial or more casual or more accessible to an audience, because Kingdom Death is very much an adult game, adult themes, very, very, very adult themes. And on Board Game Geek, it's showing that Gloomhaven is a age 12 plus, and I would not let a middle schooler play Kingdom Death.
Yeah, no, there's too many vaginas and phallic
things, just erupting blood and gore.
And in that, the theme of Kingdom Death visually is body horror. So there are hands where there shouldn't be hands, there are vaginas where there should not be vaginas, and there are faces where there should not be faces. If anybody has seen the anime Berserk, it reminds me of the end of the original season, at the end of the Egg Arc, when demons appear and faces are everywhere, and everything gets extremely horrible and disgusting. And that is why my girlfriend didn't want to play Kingdom Death.
That makes sense.
Berserk, and it was too similar. But she has been really enjoying the game since she started playing it, and luckily she managed to get over the fact that the body horror does creep her out, although it still creeps her out. Every time we touch the models.
I don't think that you can avoid that.
Especially with some of the new models, like the Beehive model? What was that called?
Oh man, yeah.
I'm gonna look a picture of this because I haven't seen this.
So the Honeyweaver expansion is absolutely disgusting.
I'm looking at it now.
And if you look at the original concept art for that little beehive on the end was just a penis. It really was.
Oh, ew. Oh, no. Why would anyone make that?
The frog dog is absolutely covered in vaginas and faces. I don't know if anyone's noticed that.
Yes.
Although if I type in the frog dog, I just get pictures of dogs in frog costumes, which is adorable. Let's take the space out. Yep, you take
it's a good alternative.
Of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, then you've got the frog dog.
The Sunstalker, which is 1,000 penises. The Wet Nurse.
The wet nurse is particularly gross.
Wet Nurse was the first one I saw where I was like, okay.
The Gorm looks like someone crossed a baby, an anglerfish, and an elephant.
Yeah, exactly.
As they do.
Oh, God. I'm just looking at all these pictures that you're putting up here, and oh, man.
One of those tentacles is definitely a penis.
Yeah. Not all of them.
So I'm just pulling images from Google for some of these monsters, and I'm just not sure it's necessary. It's definitely not necessary, but it was a deliberate choice by the designers, and it evokes the reaction I think that they were trying to achieve.
Hands.
Absolutely.
And for scale, that Spediculous model is enormous. As you can see by the torso hanging from its front, that is to scale of your models.
It's huge.
I mean, that's insane. I don't think I have any room in my room where I could put a model that big.
And these models don't fit in the box once they're assembled either.
No, once you assemble them, they have to go somewhere else. It's expecting that you have 2 shelves minimum for Kingdom Death.
People have to come to you to play Kingdom Death. You can't take the game anywhere, not unless you invest heavily in foam padded.
You have to have
cases.
Kingdom Death and a large table. And if you don't have those 2 things...
I believe the Ivory Dragon of the Abyssal Woods expansion is going to be the largest model they've produced to date.
The Ivory Dragon's amazing.
You see, that is a really cool model to have on a shelf. I'm sure there's something I haven't noticed about it.
So the Abyssal Woods campaign combines a number of existing expansion packs, such as the Flower Knight and various other things that are woodland themed, into a whole new campaign. The Dragon King also looks particularly badass. I don't know how big is the Dragon King, guys. Is it a big model?
The Dragon King is about 9 inches tall.
Right.
Significantly larger than anything that comes in the standard box. It's roughly a size and a half or 2 times the size of the Phoenix.
Really? Wow.
It makes you feel like you're fighting a dragon.
Well, that's
what I'd like
that's the intent, yeah. The Screaming God as well, I'm really looking forward to. The Screaming God has a scrolling map board, I believe. So the terrain will change as you fight it, because it is always running. So you have to keep up with it to kill it.
Oh.
Which is, a really interesting mechanic design, I think. The model for it is here with other miniatures for scale. And I think one of the huge your files are too large. It's just
The photo is too big.
the file is too powerful. That is an interesting phrase, Discord. So there's the model for it. But one of the huge incentives, I think, for getting that is look at the armor. Look at these minis.
Oh wow, that is sweet. Yeah, that looks something straight out of Demon Souls.
Dark Souls, yeah.
Dark Souls.
Dark Souls.
Yeah. Those are really cool models. And you're going to have to kill it multiple times to make those arms.
Yeah.
But isn't it going to be so worth it? Because I don't assemble the armors until I have a character wearing them. So
Right.
I'm going to own those models, but I'm not going to be allowed to assemble them until I've killed it enough times. And that's my reward as a player for achieving it.
Yeah.
We did the same thing.
From another angle, look at this shield.
My God.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying about there are some mechanical changes coming with that monster. We've talked quite a bit about models that are upcoming that are really cool. What do you think about the upcoming expansions and how they're affecting the mechanics? Things like the Gambler's Chest, and I think Michael noted down we have Scouts of Death. I don't know what that is, but you can fill me in.
I don't know about Scouts of Death, but looking at the upcoming expansions, all of them look exciting. Having played a couple of the expansions from Monster 1, it continues the established quality of the original box, where every single thing that you play and every single thing that happens is cinematic and immersive, and it really draws you in to feel like you're playing something that feels as flavorful as the model that you've built in front of you.
Yeah, and the Scouts of Death, I think, is coming with the Gambler's Chest and perhaps the 1.5 update for some people. And I believe it introduces a mechanic where you start risking losing the items when your players die, but the Scout can go ahead and gain certain advantages. But every benefit they give you introduces more risks, because that's the way the Kingdom of Death is.
Yeah.
I like it. I also like the new philosophy of death system that they're going to be putting in.
I don't know too much about that. Why don't you tell us more?
It's on the Kickstarter page, but it talks about how they're playtesting an extension of the philosophies. So they guide how survivors develops and how they level up, and affect what they can learn from battling each monster. And each philosophy ends with an epiphany that can be reached, which gives a lasting bonus to the entire settlement if the survivor who has the philosophy remains alive. So they become like your survivor itself becomes like a static buff, like an innovation. And this happens as they continue to develop and as they continue to learn specific things.
Okay, that's interesting, because a lot of the benefits you get from survivors are quite transient because they die a lot.
Yeah. Yes,
so it gives you
if you have a survivor that has bonuses, they typically stay to that survivor, but this gives an incentive to keep your survivors alive other than just having breeding stock or just having population count.
I think the inverted mountain is going to have an upside down encounter where you're hanging from the ceiling. That'll be really interesting to see how they implement it. And the Silver City expansion gives you the chance to encounter a whole new area and move your settlement towards the Silver City. So, some of these ideas are phenomenal.
I don't think that there's a limit to what this IP can do, because it's so immersive, but they've revealed so little about the game. Like, you can buy $1,000 of stuff for the material, but we're talking about an area of this world that's roughly like 1 square mile.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And I mean, potentially it could be expanded to, you're starting off in a kind of, as you say, with limited technology, kind of almost Stone Age, and you build up to having forges and armor. And there's no reason they couldn't kind of extend the timeline further. Maybe not sci-fi levels, but you know what I mean? Like moving beyond kind of generic fancy medieval, or they could add in some new technology, and then it could feel like it continues on and opens up more.
Yeah, and they've started to touch on that with their holiday releases, like their Christmas release. They have the last one that I got has the twin cleavers, but the one before that has like an SMG like machine gun that can be built and applied to a character the same way as anything else, and it's a ranged weapon, and you just get to walk into your regular fight, and some of you guys have rocks, some of them have spears, and then you come in with a 30-round clip machine gun.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it already, like, they have started experimenting with it in playtesting and with the holiday releases, so I could see this pushing forward into technological development as well.
So, I mean, we talk about the IP, but there's not really much information on the IP, is there, or the lore? There's a lot of insinuations and hints, but it doesn't really tell you much about the world. Like, what information is there on the actual mythology of Kingdom Death and on what is going on and where things came from?
The only available mythology is what you learn from encountering the specific thing. And other than that, nothing exists. And I think this really is a masterclass on how to develop an IP, because you can continue to put things in there because you haven't told people that there's rules that are broken. You just literally say, about this guy, and you're like, wow, that exists. And then he's like, and there's another one, and you're like, what? How is there two?
So I remember having a conversation with Pat Rothfuss very briefly once, where I was at a Q&A, and some of the questions that got asked that we talked about afterwards involved building a world. And he said that he thinks one of the reasons that the villains in his novels work is because there are reasons for what they're doing. And he never states in the books what those reasons are, but they're there. And their actions make sense according to an internal logic, rather than the example he used of Sword of Truth, where someone makes a choice between eternal power or their own death by opening a box, and do they get the right box? It's why would anyone take that risk? And I think there is a lore and a mythology to Kingdom Death that Adam Poots knows and no one else does.
Everything is developed in such a singular mindset that I can't imagine that this isn't like his entire life. Like, he wakes up and lives and breathes this horrific world.
Oh my God. Yeah, he dreams of these creatures at night. Oh, I can't imagine.
But I do remember reading various bits. So there are certain people are servants of other people. Like, the King's Man serves somebody, I believe. It doesn't just randomly turn up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
who is the king?
Yeah, you get these glimpses into what the wider world outside of your Lantern Light circle is whenever you have some of the story events and whenever you encounter some of the bosses, where you have this boss who like party wipes you, and you're reading the page of this boss and you're like, this guy works for a guy who works for a guy. Yeah. And he just killed 5 of our dudes.
And it makes you want to know more about the world, but doesn't give you enough to satisfy you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's another good way of world building, is because you have to try and work out or guess or make up your own little stories. And like, there's a whole area, isn't there, that's somewhat celestial, because that's when the Forge God got released as a model. Is that the Forge God forges armor and weapons for someone or something. And there was these weird cherubim things there released as some models. So Adam knows what's where in his world, and he knows why it's there, and he knows why it's doing what it's doing. He's just not telling us. And that's the feel I get.
Yes.
Yeah. It's absolutely brilliant how he just keeps the information the player needs to what they have current at their, grasp.
You can't get any further than what he wants to tell you at the moment.
Yeah.
There's not, like, you can't go find anything in the game that explains what's happening except for what's on the page in front of you.
It's a closely guarded secret, but which in the age of the internet is impressive in and of itself. But I suppose when it's mostly one man doing it, that's one of the benefits of being like a one man creative.
But there are teams. It's not just him, because there are primary designers for certain expansions and encounters.
Yeah, but I mean, he's obviously engendered that ethic in people. Like,
yes,
they want to work with him. They don't want to spoil it for people, and that's good.
I think to work on Kingdom Death, you have to be of the same mindset of, this is a special thing that can't be touched. That spoiling this gains you nothing and harms the game ultimately.
And to be an artist on Kingdom Death, you need to be absolutely messed up.
Oh,
Yeah.
You need to have some.
You have
really
to be at the
weird
top of your
fetishes, I think.
craft and the bottom of your mental sanity.
I mean, that being said as well, there's the pin-up models, which are nothing to do with the game. I mean, what are the feelings on the pin-up models? Is it something you'd ever invest in?
I've bought 2 of the holiday pinup models just to get the holiday expansions. And I feel like the pinup models are definitely designed for an audience, but most of the time, I don't find that they add enough to the character or they don't add enough to the game for me to spend the money on it. But people definitely do that.
And to be slightly negative for a second, one of the things about the art style that does put a lot of people off the game, beyond the body horror, is the somewhat over sexualization of the female models.
Not even somewhat. That's
happens with the
very
male
intentionally over
all of the male models have rippling abs and huge muscles as well. So, there's an over sexualization of just about everybody in there. But there's even more so with the female models. They all have very disproportionately sized hips and breasts. And
yes, especially for the pinup models.
well, yeah, but those are pinups. That's the point of them.
Yeah, and
even
he
in game,
designed
some of the models.
the physical thing you get is like the embodiment of a pinup. But I think that for the most part, the stock female forms are pretty respectfully designed as an average female person.
Yeah, it's the pinups where you can notice as well. I think there's been some change because in the original Kingdom Death, the pinups I think are all female, and then if you look at 1.5, they start having male pinups as well. So I think they have taken on board some comments about that. The pinups are a specific thing.
They're just there to collect, make, and paint. They're a modeler's thing. They're not a part of the game. You don't need them.
Yes.
They're just for people who like to assemble and paint miniatures.
Mm-hmm. Because they have 2 audiences. They have the game playing audience and they have the hobby crowd audience. And they really expertly walk the line of appeasing both crowds without alienating either crowd.
What is people looking at?
Definitely not a pinup. Isn't that the Golden Lantern King? Or
Yeah,
something?
it's the Lantern King. I love that model. This was one of the first large model sets that was released alongside Kingdom, the original monster, and it is really the face of horror. It is upsetting to look at in all ways.
Yeah, I mean, like the body is made out of babies. There's lots of long arms. There's
you know when you try to fight a boss and his cloak opens and it's just 300 babies stacked on top of each other.
They're just trying to get into a movie. That's all they're doing.
They're trying to buy some alcohol.
Trust us.
I know we've briefly kind of touched on some points from campaigns, but I wanted to kind of close out if you had any other stories of particularly interesting moments, hope as spoiler free as we can do, that you would like to
I've
tell us
got one.
about.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I've got one. It was let's see. It's pretty early on. It's with the lion that we were hunting. We found a baby cub and we were like, you know what? We don't get enough resources from the lion to begin with. So what if it gives you the option to chop up the baby cub and use its resources as well as whatever you get from the original hunt? And we were like, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. But there's also a chance that you summon a stronger lion to fight. Either you summon the father or you enrage the mother. And that was our first team party wipe because the mother came back very angry and just killed us.
Yeah, and she gets a round of ambush. So we
we
were like, oh cool, we killed this baby, and then it's like you fight the mom. We're like, all right, well, I think we're ready for the mom. And it's like she goes first twice. You're like, oh, we're not ready for the mom. Another one that I really liked was we had a person join to play with us, and we did the settlement phase, and we're like, your character's already set up, and they're like, cool. We're like, let's do the hunt phase. We're like, cool. And on the first event that happened, he fell into a hole and died. And he was like, is that it? And I was like, yeah, now you have to sit here while we fight the boss. It's like, this, what? Like, no, that's it. Like, you're dead. And he's like, but how can I revive my character? I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is it. You died.
Make another one.
Permadeath is real.
Our first player character death was in childbirth.
Oh,
Yeah. This game
Not even
just,
fighting
like,
anything, just during childbirth.
it really pushes your mortality at every point. You're thinking, well, this is the event for the day. Surely nothing will happen. It's like 2 of your characters died. You're like, oh, it's the settlement phase, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like we had some random people turn up and murder half our settlement. Great.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah, go ahead.
We
When we
may
fought-
have bent the rules on that one. That may have been one of our cheatings
Yeah.
that we did because
Oh, there's one of the holiday expansions I got has an event where you have to keep track of the amount of times you've cheated in Kingdom Death, and then you add that to a roll. And if you roll low enough, a good thing happens. But if you've cheated too many times, only bad things happen.
So one of our fights was the Butcher, which is the first real sort of boss fight that turns up and starts trying to mess with your shit rather than you're trying to find it to eat it.
Right.
And it just charges. It just does nothing but try to kill everyone every turn while screaming incoherently and making everyone take psychic damage. But
Yeah.
one of our players, who was an archer, decided to keep hiding behind his wife. So it kept charging at him because he had, for whatever reason, he had priority target token, etc. And it kept knocking over his wife as it ran through her, and she only got to make one attack in the whole fight because she spent most of the time on the floor because he kept choosing to hide behind her, which didn't actually benefit. He was just hoping it would attack her instead of him, and it just always went for him and bowled her over on the way. It was quite hilarious. So now it's become a thing that he hides behind her in most fights now.
I think we cheated in the Butcher fight too because it was a complete wipe, but we didn't want to lose the opportunity of getting the equipment because it was like, oh great, we lost the fight, but we killed him at the end, but we still technically shouldn't have gotten the equipment, but we totally did.
We were like, oh, the disemboweled person crawled back and gave us her stuff. Thank you.
So we've
She
never
died immediately.
intentionally cheated, but we've realised after the fact that we got the rules wrong.
That happens also as well. Yeah. And your second playthrough is always so much more brutal whenever you're like, I remember I did this wrong the first time. Yes, my guys die here.
Or we'll frequently forget to factor in an innovation that we have when we do something.
Mhm.
'Cause there's-
Oh, yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we encounter a lot.
I remember being really attached to the morals that you pick for your settlement. And it's a binary choice. You're choosing pretty much civility or savagery between.
Which ones did you choose on your first playthrough?
In my first playthrough, we picked for new life, it was survival of the fittest instead of protect the young. And whenever people died, we picked cannibalism over graves. And then when we started to develop a society, we chose to accept the darkness instead of collective toil. And for our conviction, we chose barbaric over romantic. And we destroyed everything in combat for like the second half of our playthrough. Like we didn't lose a character. We had like the same 8 people destroying everything. But every time we tried to have a new child, it was like it died in childbirth and your survivor died and you ate both of them. Oh.
We've so far chosen cannibalism and survival of the fittest. So,
Yeah.
Our survival rates in combat are actually higher than you'd expect, but our survival rates in the settlement phase are almost non-existent. And now we're finding that our big problem is actually keeping enough people in the settlement. It's not even the fights are obviously brutal, but it's the population is the problem. We've got 2 women in the settlement, and if we lose either of them, we're screwed. And we're randomizing every time we find a survivor, whether it's male or female, or when a survivor's born. So we're 50-50ing it rather than choosing it, because there's no specification how you're supposed to do that. And as a result, we're fully aware that if we lose both of these women, our settlement is doomed. It will just run out of people because there's no one to breed.
Did you guys ever get the Gregalope?
Man, the Gregalope.
I've not had a Gregalope.
Okay, so the Gregalope.
We never caught it, but
The Gregalope is an event that I got to experience on my second playthrough, the one that Jack did not get to play. And it is one of the antelopes, but it's much larger and covered with tumors and scar tissue, and its ancient milky eyes look at you, and you have to catch it to fight it. So your event in the hunt is trying to roll high enough and add your character speed to be able to touch the Gregalope. And if you can grab it, it'll turn around and fight you. And then you can kill the Gregalope.
Or can it kill you?
Mostly I think
Is it a hard
kills
fight?
you.
Yeah.
Is it one of the legendary versions of a monster?
Yeah, it's one of the legendary antelopes. And if you kill the Gregalope, the person who lands the killing blow gains a permanent bonus to movement.
I never caught it. Never fought it.
Just too fast.
It's too quick for him. But Jack was always running after it with like one broken leg. Come back here.
It's my white well.
Yeah, when Grabthar the Destroyer lost his leg, he became the town stud. Just like, right, you're gonna sit here and make babies, Grabthar. That's your job in life now.
I think that's what happened to Scatman. I think he survived long enough to retire and teach people.
Shepard's like, oh yeah, you need to go and have a child with Scatman. Like, no, man, I know what he's into. I don't want any part of that.
I don't like this.
We're going full 2 girls, 1 cup on this. No. He's there like, hey baby, you want to eat poop? No.
We always ended up naming our characters after different pop culture things. So we have like RZA from Wu-Tang, Ygritte from Game of Thrones, Herman, Hermione, Thor. All of them are dead. Every one of them.
Even Thor, champion of Asgard, survived Kingdom Death.
We named Thor's son Ragnarok, and both of them died. Oh, hey, I found Scatman. He did retire.
Yeah.
He lived long enough.
Well, I think he died at some point because his cards kind of crossed through like what we were doing to keep track of who was dead and not. So
Maybe he didn't get updated. Maybe he did die.
it says killed by the Watcher.
Oh, so he died at the end. He lived all the way to the final fight.
He had a good life, Scatman.
Way to go, Scatman.
It's amazing the stories you get from this game that just live beyond the game itself.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys ever encounter the event, the Portcullis?
Nope. I'm still halfway through my first playthrough, so I've got a lot of events.
I don't know what happens. Like we've always run into the Portcullis, but we've never been able to pass the checks, so we don't know what happens. But during the hunt, you're walking to go find something, and you find a Portcullis, just a giant grate standing in the field with nothing attached to it. And you have to be strong enough to pull it open, and you then have to have a key to open the door on the inside. And I never had both of those. So I don't know what's inside that giant door that's in the field, but I've seen it several times.
I mean, I like the fact that there's so much there you can go back and explore. I mean, you've said you've played it through 2 times without expansions, and there's still stuff you haven't uncovered. And then each expansion adds in more.
Yes. There's so much. I like my soft cover book that comes with the Monster 1 is like creased on the edges, and the pages are like crumpled, and the binding is starting to break because I have like every time we play it, I'm like digging through and opening every single page to see what new thing we're going to do today.
And the way we play it as well, which isn't in the book, is that we'll pass the book around, and the person that's making the roll or doing the hunt event, the person next to them will read the hunt event, so they don't know the answers or the tables that they're rolling on.
I love that. It's just roll and go. See what happens.
The other thing that we do in the wrong order is we tend to start with the hunt and the showdown and then end with the settlement phase. So we end mid-Lantern year, but we find it's easier to sort out all the items and what you're building after you've done the hunt.
Yeah, that's a change that we developed about halfway through as well, is just tweaking it a little bit to make it a little bit more accessible and fun, because it feels like it bogs the game down to start with the settlement phase.
Yeah.
I think when Monster Hunter World comes out for the PC, there needs to be a Kingdom Death mod.
Oh God,
man! If there was, I would quit my job and play that game. That would be the only thing I did
for about 2 months until you got evicted for not paying rent.
The hands.
So, that's been an episode on Kingdom Death, which is a very good, very expensive board game. Really the kind of game that is best bought for a club or for a very enthusiastic collector or hobbyist. It's been great to have Jack and Buddy on the show, joining us from Texas, a state larger than our country. Everything's bigger in Texas, boys, even Kingdom Death.
Yes. Kingdom Death.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull a slip out of the hat for our next episode. And Tom, what is the hat today? You're a man of many hats. You must be running out soon.
I am running out soon, but a new hat that arrived fairly recently and I've been wearing over the winter months. I now have an Avengers themed bobble hat, which is amazing.
If we get Infinity War out of this hat, I'll have to do some sort of forfeit now, won't I? Because I've said it. But,
I don't think we have that on the list, so we should add that to the list under movies. Our category is video games.
Vidya. Excellent.
Number 1, which is speedrunning, game glitches and hacks, which I think we have Wade down as our guest for.
Excellent. I don't get it. This is going to be great because I don't get the point of speedrunning. I don't get the appeal.
Wade will wax lyrical about why he loves it, so I'm sure...
I like long, meandering games that take ages to complete and have loads of things to discover. I'm not interested in bypassing all of that to complete it in the shortest possible time. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to have those two opposing viewpoints. Next time on The Hat of Many Things, join Mike and Tom for speedrunning hacks and glitches. I don't know what accent I was doing there.
That was brilliant, but we'll use that. That'll be the outro. Perfect. Excellent.
Jack, buddy, I don't know if you have any projects, any things you work on, any blogs or anything like that. If you've got anything that you'd like to plug, please do feel free.
Sure. I'll go ahead and plug. I run a kind of Poddities. It's called Poddities. I said that wrong.
You just mispronounced your product.
I run a podcast kind of channel network thing where I've got like 4 or 5 podcasts under it that I'm constantly working on called Poddities, Poddities.
Poddities. Like oddities.
Sorry. So Poddities. We've got a generic movie watching show as well as a D&D podcast on there. We've also got a podcast where we make up new podcasts. We just take a random topic and then go through and make a brand new podcast out of it in the second half. So a couple podcasts with that. And we're also amateur board game designers as well. So hopefully
me and Jack operate under the moniker One Man Studios.
That's very, very odd.
We've got 4 games in development right now. And those will
Are you Siamese? We've not had a photo of you guys. Is this 2 heads on one person? Are you Siamese twins? Is this the one man studios? Is this actually 3 people in one conversation, but with 4 mouths? Are we going full Kingdom Death?
And 6 hands.
How many penises and vaginas? Because we're going very Kingdom Death.
So One Man Studios designing board games.
We don't have anything out yet, but
okay.
We're.
But what are you working
close?
On? Tease us.
Tease you. We've got a very Kingdom Death inspired co-op deck builder game, that we've been working on for a little over a year called Behemoth. And we kind of took a side turn to work on a agricultural space making.
It's a space farming game.
Space farming game. Just you kind of need that after all the body horror, death, and stuff. So.
And then we have a wrestling game.
Yeah, so we've got a couple. We're looking to hopefully get something kickstarted, but at some point this year. We'll let you know. We'll send something to the UK.
Excellent. So keep your eyes on Kickstarter and have a look at Poddities. I'm sure they'll be putting details up there. So massive thank you for joining us all the way from Texas. And I think that's a wrap. Let's find a picture of the Oblivion mosquito. Why? Look at that giant penis. That's what that is.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, okay.
That's not necessary. That is not.
Why does the penis
necessary.
have fingers?
Everything has fingers.
And a face.
Entire-
The penis has a face.
Yeah,
Faces, fingers, and hands.
Yeah, no, you get some great narratives, some great little stories. We were telling one earlier about Dickless Neil, who had his balls stolen by the manhunters, and then it's another settlement event that made everyone's name get changed, and then we found a new survivor and called him Neil, leading to great confusion when we all got back, and the person who thought was Neil was dead, but there was a new guy called Neil, and this made no sense. And we also had the moment where Hatespawn gained some clarity in the same session as his new half-sister, Lovespawn, from his father's actual caring relationship, went cracked and started to shout incoherently. So as he stopped screaming Hatespawn and decided, actually, guys, I'd rather you called me Gareth, Lovespawn descended into mindless gibbering of her own name, and they swapped positions. we were wondering if we bred them, we would get Spawn, or Ambivalent Spawn. So Spawn is now a family lineage in our game.
Yeah.